Brant, your CT310 TA. I just want to go over some of the information from today's lab on HTML coding and give you some material that you can review. So to start out with, I'm going to take us to the CT310 webpage. Go to this progress page, go down to the lab. So today the lab exercise was fairly straightforward. Basically, I'm not going to have the instructions up while I do this, but I'll show you kind of what has to be done. Now today I'm working from my laptop at home, so I'm not on the lab machine, so what I'm going to do is SSH into the machines. I have this command on my computer that makes it really quick and easy, but I'm going to lab hop into these machines. You can see I'm in my home directory right now, so I'm going to go down to local HTML. And here, since we're doing this for the first time, I'm going to remove this lab so that I can start over and demonstrate for you guys. So, like in the instructions over here, what we're going to do is, currently I'm inside our my local HTML, so I'm going to make a directory for lab 2. I'm just going to do those permissions for it now so I don't forget. So I'm going to change lab 2 to 711. That should give us the following permissions. So basically execute permissions for everyone else and read permissions. That just probably better to do 655, but I think this will still work since they're not actually accessing this directory. And then I'm going to create this recipe.html file. So I'm going to use the touch command, which just creates a file or updates a timestamp if the file already exists. So I'm going to touch recipe. As you can see now, if I do an ls, it's there. If I do an ls-l to list the permissions, you can see that it only has read and write for the user, so I want to change that real quick. I believe 655 is the right number. Okay, so now it should have read permissions for everyone and execute permissions for everyone, which is good. If you guys ever get confused about these permissions numbers, you can always use the man page for chmod. I like to just Google it because I always forget and it's easy to Google stuff, and especially when we're doing web development. Okay, so now, since I currently am not on the campus Wi-Fi, I'm going to have to use a VPN real quick to get into it. So this is something, if you guys want to get into local HTML from home, I can definitely show you all how to do. And I'll give you guys a little bit more information on how to set up a development environment on your own computer. I just have to verify this real quick. I can show you how to set all this stuff up in your own computer. I will maybe go over it later in this video, show you how to actually get a web server for your computer that you can use to run PHP and stuff if you feel like just working on these things at home. And that gives you an opportunity to not have to always be on campus or not have to always get in using SSH. It's personally, it's up to you. So seems like my network connection was able to transfer over pretty well. Let's go ahead and check and see if I can access that local page. So local HTML is 4444, and then I'm going to go to Brant R. That's my EID, lab 2. So if we look at this file path for this, right, it's local HTML lab 2. So basically, what you can think of is just like your EID is like the root of this local HTML directory, and then anything that comes after that you can append up here, and then recipe. Now, I didn't put anything in the file, so we shouldn't see anything. Bad request. You're speaking plain HTTP. Okay, so it's giving this to me because I didn't put HTTPS at the front, so I'm going to do that. Okay, so now I'm opening recipe HTML, but it's blank because if we look here, you can see there's nothing in the file. So what I'm going to do real quick is I want to open this file and edit it in a real text editor, but again, since I'm at home, I have to kind of do a little trick. I'm going to use this tool called CyberDuck, which is another tool that you can use to basically access the file system at the CS machines, but you can do it from home. If this is something you guys want to learn, I'll go over it really quickly at the end of the video as well. But for now, I just have this profile saved. So I'm going to connect to Olympia's file system in the CS lab. I'm going to go to my local HTML directory, which is right here. Go into that. Go into lab 2. Okay, so here's recipe, and then I'm just going to edit this file remotely. So basically what my computer is doing is, what this program does is, I'm editing it here on my computer, but every time I save it here, it actually copies it through the internet onto the lab machines. So I'm doing that. So now I have this open so I can edit this file. So now whatever I edit in here should appear in here in this recipe HTML. So to start off with, we're going to do some basic HTML. We always have to do this doc type HTML at the top, so I'm going to do that. And for those of you who don't know, this is the editor that I like to use, especially for web development and stuff like that. I use Visual Studio Code. It's from Microsoft, but it's open source and it's really lightweight. So it works like a text editor, but it has all these extensions and tools that are really useful. Okay, and then next thing is we got to do this HTML, and that's going to enclose our whole document. That's just basically, it's another one of those things that you just have to do, but it's kind of hard to explain why. Okay, now there are two components to an HTML document. There is a head and a body. There we go. Wow. Inside of the head is where we keep all of the stuff, like it's where we keep our meta tags, which is information about the web page that is usually used by Google and stuff to when you're doing searches and stuff. We have the title. We have links to style sheets, links to JavaScript files, links to other sorts of resources that are going to be pulled into our page when we're using it. And that's stuff we can talk about later. But for now, let's put a title on our page. So this title, the title, by the way, is the thing that appears up here. So you can see like in some of these other pages, like CSS tutorial, CT310 Recitation 2, stuff like that. Okay, so if I change this to, let's say I change it to, since we're doing a recipe page for this lab, I don't know if you guys read through the lab or not, but the lab is to create a recipe page. So I'm going to make the title my recipe. Okay, so now I'm going to save that, and we should see, if I refresh, see how the title changed up top. And sorry, this is CyberDuck just telling me that that file uploaded successfully to the CS server. Okay, cool. So it uploaded successfully. You can see the recipe stuff worked out. Cool. So now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a few meta tags. Like I said, this is mostly information for web crawlers and stuff like that, but it's always good to have some meta tags just to give some information about the page. What it really means is like meta information about the page. So one thing, it's always good to have the author, so you know who made the page. So author name, and then I believe it is, I want to say value, but I'm not sure. That's something I can look up in a sec, actually. I'm going to look that up right now. So a lot of times with these tags, it can be really easy to forget what the exact structure is. So what I always do is, this is why I always talk about W3 schools as like such a godsend and such a great tool to have, is I'm just going to go ahead and search, go to the HTML section. And you can obviously look through it like this. Honestly, this is like one way of doing it, but I'm pretty lazy, so I just go W3 schools, meta tags. Okay, cool. So it's going to pull this up. Okay, it's name, and it's actually, so I thought it was value, but it's actually content. So that's the structure of these. And right now, so what I'm doing in Visual Studio Code is I have like certain hotkeys so that I can, what is going on? There we go. Okay. That way, I'm typing 3 things at once because I'm lazy and I like using those hotkeys to make me code faster. So then I'll probably do some keywords and description. HTML, CSS, food, because we're doing a recipe. Description. Hopefully you don't hear my fan making a ton of noise right now. My computer is, for some reason, really hot. Okay. Description, a recipe page. And then I'll do one more tag, name, content type, I believe. And then that will be UTF-8. This just lets people know that we're using the UTF-8 encoding. Oh, it's char set, actually. Ooh. I'm just going to copy and paste that. So the char set just says that we're using UTF-8 so that it knows, like, there's certain web pages that might have foreign languages and stuff that might use different UTF encodings because they have a wider range of characters. In English, our alphabet's very small, but something like Japanese or Chinese, or I guess Mandarin or Cantonese is a better, whatever. Basically, those have all those kanji and those characters and stuff, and so there's a lot more of them than we have letters, and so they need a larger, they need more bits so that they can capture all those things. Okay, so we have a title, we have some meta tags. I'm not going to link in the style sheet yet, but since that is something you guys need to know for your assignment, that is something I will definitely do near the end of this lab so that you can see that. But for now, let's go ahead and write some HTML code. Let's get to the fun stuff. So, as you can see, we don't have anything in this page. Now, if you looked at the example when you were, oh, that's the W3 schools. Here we go. If you looked at the example, you can see that it's got a pie and like an image and some headers and stuff. So what we're going to do is go ahead and we'll make that first header. Now I'm going to do a different recipe than blueberry pie, mostly because I have this recipe memorized because I really like it. It's called reishi. It's like a Swiss potato pancake is the best way to describe it. My reishi recipe. Okay, cool. And so now I just added that header line. So this H1 tag stands for header, and so H stands for header, the 1 stands for the size. So there's actually several different types of headers before I show this to you so you guys can see. Oh, this wasn't the best way to do this. Yeah. So H2, H3, H4. Okay, perfect. So now I'm going to go ahead and load this page that I'm editing. You can see that header 1 is actually big, and then this one's number 2, number 3, number 4. So if I were to, this is also a useful tool to know when you start doing this stuff, is if you do inspect, you can right click. I'm using Chrome, but Safari and the other browsers have something very equivalent. You can see here's my header 1 tag, my header 2 tag. This is my code right here, and this is what I see on the left. And so if I highlight it, it highlights it. It's just really useful. Okay, so there's that. Now I'm going to use header 1 because it's the biggest, and so I'm going to delete these other ones real quick. And I'm going to go ahead and put an image in. So you can see how this one has a pie image. So I'm going to go ahead and put an image of reishi in here. Now, in order to embed an image, you create the image tag and then you do source and you set source to the path of the image file. Now, if we look in this is actually my local HTML directory. I can also show you using ls that I only have this recipe HTML. So I need to get an image file in here real quick. So I actually have a picture downloaded already in my downloads. So I'm going to go ahead and just copy that in. Okay. See, it's uploading. It just finished. Okay, so let's copy that name. And we're going to just set source pointing to this name. Now, I'm going to load the page and it's not going to work. And I'm sure a lot of you can guess why. And the reason is not because the path is wrong. It is because, you guessed it, that the permissions are wrong. Again, because every time we do something, the default permissions aren't set. You can see how my terminal will actually highlight things with different permissions. Okay, so we'll do chmod 655. This is going to set read and write or read and execute permissions, I believe. Yeah, so Rishi now has read and execute permission, so this image can be read, right? So now, let's reload the page. There we go. And so now my image popped up. Cool. And just like the other page, I'm going to go ahead and put this in. This is pretty uncommon nowadays, but HR stands for horizontal rule. That's going to create that line that you see in the recipe example. Honestly, I don't know how often people still use these, and I haven't seen them in any websites personally, so I kind of stay away from using them because I don't really think that they're common, but I'm going to put one in just for, since we're not really doing any styling yet, it's nice to have some division and just kind of see. So cool, so now we have our header and our image and our rule. I'll do a section for ingredients, so I'll do another header 1. Actually, you know what? Let's do a header 2, just so we have something that's slightly smaller. Ingredients. All right, and for my ingredients, there could be a couple ways of specifying this, right? Like you could do a list, or just so I can show you how it works, I'm actually going to do an HTML table. So a table, you can specify using the table tag, and it is made up of table rows, and each table row consists of table data. So the best way to think about this is that the TDs, the table data tag, these ones, are these TDs are the columns and the TRs are the rows. That's the best way to think about it. So first row, first column. Okay, so one of the main ingredient in this is potatoes. And then maybe for the second column, I'll do the type. So russet potatoes. And then I'll do the amount. So let's say you're going to use a pound of them. I don't know. Okay, cool. And then my other ingredient, I'm just going to go ahead and copy and paste these so I don't type a bunch of tags. Onions are usually pretty useful. Green onions are good. And we'll say one bunch of them. Okay. So now let me load this and show you all. You can see, so it's weird, right? Because it doesn't really look much like a table right now. It doesn't have any lines and stuff. But these things are arranged in rows and columns. And if I were to do an inspect here, and this is something cool, and we'll talk about CSS, but if I were to give all the table datas, so I'm going to actually mess with the CSS code here, if it'll let me. Oh, well, that's unfortunate. Okay, well, I will show you in a little bit. I'll put some borders around this, and you'll be able to see. And it'll look more like a table when I do that. But for now, just know that they're aligned in rows and columns. And so now, the table also usually has a header, right? So like with this one, like we probably want to put something above that says like ingredient, type, amount. So I'm going to do, first of all, I'm going to do a table row for the top. And then I'm going to do TH for table headers. And so ingredient, I'm going to copy these down, type, weight. Okay, so you see these TH for table header elements. Now if I reload this, you can see they're bolded, which is cool. Okay, so that way you know, like, now it looks a little bit more like a table when we do this, right? Because everything you can see is like aligned. All right, so we have that table of ingredients. Now, let's do another H rule to divide the sections, and we'll do a header number 2, and this will be directions. So for directions, I want to show you an example of a list. Here, I'll reload this so you can see that those changes really did happen. I'm going to show you an example of a list. There's two types of lists. There's an unordered list, which is denoted by the tag UL, U for unordered and L for list. And then there is a ordered list, which is denoted with the tag OL. Same reasons. So each list considers of these outer tags and then something called a list element, LI. Or list index, I guess, probably. LI element presents a list item. Okay, cool. This is what's cool about Visual Studio Code, is like it'll give you this thing that you can read. Okay, so I'm going to put some directions, shred the potatoes. these don't really have to happen in any particular order, right? So I'm going to put them in my unordered list. Chop the onions. Cool. So we'll do a header for something smaller just to say preparation. Preparation. I think that's the right spelling. If I'm not, you can all make fun of me next time you see me in lab. Okay. And then cooking, I guess, something. So in these things have to happen in order, so I'll put them in my ordered list. And for this recipe, the first thing you got to do is, so the oil's heated in the pan, so you want to push the potatoes into the pan. Press is probably a better description. Cook them for probably like 10 minutes until browned. And then, I don't know, after that, flip them or something. It doesn't really matter. This isn't a cooking class, this is a coding class, so. And cook the other side. So I just wanted to show you that these things have to happen in order, so we'll use the ordered list. Okay, so you can see this is the unordered list right here under preparation, right? That's this one. If we do an inspect to show you, right here, right, hold on. Okay, unordered list, UL, there we go. See, they have the little bullet points next to them. Now, when we look at the ordered list, you can see they're numbers. So another thing to note is that you can actually embed lists inside of other lists. So let's say that I want to actually add another like bullet point underneath this heat the oil to tell them to use vegetable oil instead of olive oil. I'll do another UL unordered list, and I'll do list element, and I'll say use canola oil. Okay, so now when I reload this, you can see it's indented. Now you can actually do the same thing with ordered lists as well. You can indent them under an unordered list or vice versa. So I could in here say I want them to chop the onions very finely or something. There we go. See, this one's an ordered list, so it has a number. So basically that's just some basic HTML stuff, right? Knowing how to use tables, knowing how to use lists. The one thing I didn't show you guys, which is probably one of the most popular HTML tags, or one of them, is the P for paragraph. So I am writing this recipe because I love food. And this is basically just a text type of thing. Yeah, there you go. Now, the funny thing about this is that, weirdly enough in HTML, for some reason, this will render even without the p tag, but I wouldn't recommend doing this because this doesn't define a set boundary for what this text will be, and it's really hard to work with. And honestly, I shouldn't even show you this because you should never do this. So here's a paragraph tag. The other thing is another interesting tag that you'll see a lot is called div. Here, I'll create some space so you can see it. Div just stands for divider, and it doesn't really have any style of its own. However, inside a div, you'll contain other tags, and divs can be styled and so on and so forth. So you can see I put this tag, and by itself, like I could put some text in here, right? Like hello world, or I could even put a paragraph in here, and this will display. But mostly, like, the divs are a way of organizing your HTML, but can also be used later on for styling. They become really, really useful. See, the div kind of has a defined box around it. So the good thing to note with all these HTML tags actually is that they all have this kind of defined box around them, right? And that's something when we start doing styling that you'll need to remember is that these boxes give us a lot of information about really like how the page is laid out and so on and so forth. Okay, so that's the end of the HTML lesson. I'm going to go ahead and close this file, and the first thing, actually, you know what? First thing I'm going to do is keep this open, and I'm going to show you how to link a style sheet in to the file and how to do some basic styling. I'm not going to go over every CSS tag because there's a ton of them, but just so you know how to do some styling. So first things first is we have to create a CSS file. So I'm going to touch, and I'm going to call it styles.css. Now remember, like everything else, before we forget, change the permissions so we can access it. Okay, now inside of our HTML file, we're going to link this in using the link tag. Rel for, I'm actually not sure what rel stands for, but styles.css. And then type of this is text/CSS. And that should be good for now. I think there's something that I'm missing here. By the way, if you want to learn more about CSS, go to this w3schools/CSS. It is really, really good. In fact, I'm going there right now because I totally forgot linking in the thing. Well, I think this will work for now. So, I don't have anything in this style sheet file. So first of all, let me open that up. Okay, so see how it's empty? So it's not going to affect anything. So that we know it works, what I'm going to do is CSS, a quick overview, is that it's kind of like it consists of a selector and then a set of rules. So here's the body selector. So I'm saying basically body. And typically it's hierarchical, so if I apply one style to the body, oftentimes it'll cascade down. That's why it's called a cascading style sheet. So inside the body, I'm going to do color. Now color is actually the color of the text. I'm going to make all the text red. Now if our style sheet works, well, like I hope it does, when I reload this page, everything will be red. And it did not work. Wait. Hold on. So you can see I'm checking right now the sources, and it looks like this page did not link in correctly. So I'm going to go ahead and make sure that I'm doing that right. Back to W3 Schools we go. How to add CSS. Perfect. If you ever forget and you don't want to come back to this lab, you can Google it. Okay, so this is where I went wrong. Rel is for style sheet, so this should be style sheet, and then this one should actually be href. Href is for, it's like when you do a link tag, which is something I should show you in a second because that's really important. When you use not this link tag, but the A, I'll show you in a second. But basically, this href points to a file or something on the web. So it can either be on the web or on your local machine. It's on my local machine in this case. So now everything is red. Perfect. Cool. I changed all the text to red. That's nice. So that's how you link in a style sheet. So to be clear and reiterate, you do this link element, you do rel style sheet, href pointing to your file. If all your styles files are, let's say, in a directory below, like you have a CSS directory, then you'll have to put that full path. And then obviously specifying the type that it's a CSS file is always good. So now let's not make everything red because that's kind of ridiculous, but we can do something like change the font. And let's do something funny like fantasy. Cool. So that's kind of sweet, right? And now let's do a little bit more styling. So here's the thing is, remember earlier I was talking about this table and how it doesn't really look like a table. Let's add some borders to those elements. So I'm going to say table. I actually think you can do this. So this one, I'm going to test to make sure this works before I tell you that this is going to work. Cool. Okay, so I'm just saying for the table, the TR, and the TD, right, the table row and the table data or column, add a border that is 1 pixel wide and make it solid. I can even change the color, I think solid green, let's say. Yeah, that's cool. I like that. And now I have a border around it, which is kind of nice, right? You can see that these ones don't have anything around them. That's because they're table header elements, right? They're not table data. So if I add the table header, they should also get something around them. That's cool, and that is great. It's kind of a lot of borders, though. So I think we can do this as well. And underneath table, border collapse. Collapse. Okay, hopefully this merges them together. Yes, cool. So border collapse just says if you have a bunch of borders next to each other, just combine them into one thing. Sometimes it works. Now, this is probably a good time to talk about padding and margins, but I know that Russ has not gone over it in class, so I'm just going to give you a quick, show you really quick, kind of, because it's going to be hard for me to explain as well as Ben does. But basically, everything has, so you can see here, I'm trying to kind of highlight this, but it's kind of hard. Let's look at an element that's, so here we go, this header. So this header has a margin around it. It doesn't really have any padding. In fact, let's see if we can play with that. So padding is kind of like within the element, and margin is kind of like outside. Remember how I said everything has boxes drawn around it? So we can also do So this is a fun way to play with the styling of the page without having to go edit and reload the file every time. But basically, padding and margins are something that you're going to come across a lot. I'm not going to fully go into them, but basically, if you want to play with them, you can use this, or you can actually specify padding top, bottom, so forth. And actually, I think that's something that we'll just wait until Ben talks about, until I go more into it. Okay, so we've talked about how to add a few styles, how to change the color of the text, how to change the font family, how to add borders to your tables. Let's do one thing here. Let's, for our image tag, let's actually do, this is a fun one, border radius is how we round things. So I'm going to make that 5px. And that should give it some rounding. See how they rounded a little bit. Now let's do that like 25. See what that happens. Yeah, that's cool. So, and before I go on, things can be specified, because I know I've been using this px, which stands for pixels. They can be specified in px. They can be specified in a percentage. I use px a lot because it's numerically easier to understand. There's also something called em, which has to do with the font size. It's like a measure related to the size of the font. So it's kind of confusing, but if you were to make the font bigger, I believe EM would also become bigger. Not something that I really am able to talk about with a lot of sincerity right now. So there will be more CSS to come, but I just wanted to show you all how to link a style sheet in and how to do some basics. And then we can talk about more advanced selectors and stuff like that in the future. Okay, cool. So I've talked about CSS, I've talked about HTML, I've talked about how to use them together a little bit, how to get one of your first recipe pages up, which is good. You'll use this in your homepage assignment. Now, I'm going to show you all how to set up an environment so that you can work from home on some of this stuff. I'm going to first show you the environment that I'm currently using, where I am editing things on the lab remotely, and then I'll talk to you about setting up a web server on your own computer if you're so interested. So you can tune out now if you want to. So I use this tool called CyberDuck, and what CyberDuck does like I said earlier, is it's just a tool that copies files over SSH, but it gives you this easy-to-use interface so that you don't have to worry about typing, if you guys have ever done this before, scp, brantr@olympia.cs.callstate.edu, home directory, all that stuff. It just takes, it's so hard to do every time you edit a file. So using this tool is so much easier, and then you can use whatever editor you want to use, or you can interact with this in a kind of similar way to how you would interact with a normal file system. So this CyberDuck tool is free. It can be found at cyberduck.io. They are going to ask you to donate like crazy. You don't have to. I always say donate to open source is good, but I understand that we're poor college students. So download CyberDuck if you so wish. And as far as setting up your configurations, I'm going to disconnect and show you how to set up a configuration. So you're going to click this open connection. You're going to use SFTP for SSH file transfer protocol. That's the one we're going to use these lab machines because it's secure. Now, for the server, you'll specify, I'll use one I haven't used before, Tallahassee, is that how you spell it? That's yes.callstate.edu. My username, which is brantr, yours will be different. My password, which I'm not going to tell you. And in fact, you can type your password in here, but I have some SSH keys set up, so I'm going to use that instead. Okay, so let's see if this works. This is I feel like I'm not spelling it right. Let's pick a different Kaplan. Hell yeah. Alright, let's do that. Alright. Alright. Let's see if we can connect to this one. Yes, we can. Cool. So basically, again, I just put in the server information, my password, or my username and password, or in this case, if you have an SSH private key, you can use that. And now I'm in here into CyberDuck, which is great. Now if I want to edit a file, I can right-click on it, go down to Edit With. Obviously, I hope you're not coding in Microsoft Word, but if you have Text Editor, Notepad++, or if you have VS Code, which is what I like to use, or if you have Kate, or whatever you use, feel free to use that. So that's one way that you can edit some files. And then when you save this file, CyberDuck just automatically uploads it back to the CS servers. So what I do is I play around in CyberDuck, I edit my files like I would normally, and then I just look at the CS web pages and refresh like I was doing earlier. So that's a really good way to do it. And then if you need to do anything with the SSH terminal, you can always just use the SSH terminal. Now, if you are not a Mac user or Unix user, you'll have to use PuTTY. I trust that at this point you guys have probably learned how to use it. I can't show you a PuTTY demo, obviously, because I'm on a Mac, but you can download PuTTY if you Google it, and that'll give you SSH, but CyberDuck should work on Windows and Mac. Okay, cool, so I talked about that. So now, let's finally talk about setting up a web server. So, sometimes when I am coding at home, I will use a web server that is running on my machine. Now, this one for me is called MAMP. MAMP is by Apache. You can search Apache LAMP, MAMP, or WAMP. You're probably wondering why they all sound similar but are different. Where are you? Okay, MAMP. Here we go. So you will have to look for MAMP or LAMP or WAMP depending on what you're downloading, but basically MAMP is for Macs, WAMP is for Windows, LAMP is for Linux, and I can't vouch for how it runs on Windows and Linux. I know that it's originally designed for Linux and that it is open source and it is free, and I am fairly certain that these are the type of servers that they use at the CS department. They can compile PHP. They can also do MySQL and some other good stuff. I end up doing MySQL later. you have Apache and Nginx as an option. I think the CS building is Nginx. Now, when you get it, you're going to get this control panel, and you can set your web server document root. This is the directory that it's going to look for files at. So I have been using it to run the web page, the course web page locally at home, so that when I'm editing the labs and stuff, you guys aren't seeing all those changes online, right? So I'm going to show you that. I'm going to start these servers real quick. But you can make a web directory in your file system, and then you can go ahead and write PHP or HTML or whatever, and then you just go to localhost. So what will happen is that depending on the port, so your Apache port is going to be 88. I mean, mine's set to 8888. So when I'm trying to connect to my web server or website, I go to localhost, which is the IP address of my machine, and :8888 for the port, like when we did earlier, the 4444. Okay, so now you can see that I am looking at the course web page, but I am not at CT310. So that's just it's a quick thing. You'll have to download it and do a little bit of it yourself, but I wanted to show you kind of how it works because it's really useful. And if you're looking at doing WordPress in the future or something, you can do that on top of this as well, and it's super easy. So yes, and it's funny, originating IP is 1. Okay. I just wanted to show you guys that. I wanted to show you guys the CyberDuck stuff and how to edit it from home. If you can figure out the CSU VPN, you can also do it that way. You have to get Pulse Secure, and then the configurations are kind of complicated. I'm not sure exactly if I can give you all that information because I'm not sure how I got it, but I went on ACNS or something. So you guys could also do it that way. There's a lot of ways to do it, but I just wanted to show you that you can set up a server on your machine. So thank you guys for taking the time to listen to me. It's always weird to talk in front of your computer, in front of no one, but I really hope that this is useful to you, and I'm really sorry that I missed the lab today, and I know that's unacceptable, and been dealing with some stuff at home, and I apologize, but I appreciate you guys as students, and I appreciate your patience, and I really hope that this was a useful experience for you.